Hello, and welcome to Inside the Interview, the podcast where we uncover what hiring manager really want. I am Vijay Dabi, and throughout my career in data and IT, I have sat on both sides of the interview table as both a candidate and a hiring manager. Through this podcast, we are bringing you honest conversation with professionals who have real experience making hiring decisions and building successful career. Today, I am joined by Alan Braley, a solution architect at the University of Warwick, where he has worked for over 35 years. We will be discussing how technology careers have evolved, what employers are looking for in technical candidates, and what advice Alan would give to anyone hoping to build a successful career in IT. Alan, thank you for joining us on this podcast today. Welcome to Inside the Interview.
Hello, Vijay. It's a pleasure to be grilled by you.
Alan, can you please talk to us about your career and role at University of Warwick?
Absolutely. So you mentioned how long I've been working here, and I had brown hair when I started. Viewers will see that's no longer the case. So 35 years in IT, just given me a broad experience across the technology landscape, from infrastructure all the way through to applications, which I've helped develop. And along the way, I've worked in systems design, service support, service management, change management in there, and a team leadership role. So like yourself, I've recruited to roles on many occasions. My current role, as you also mentioned, is as a solution architect here, which I think brings my previous experience together, really. I design technology solutions that solve business problems here at the University of Warwick, while making sure that they align with the wider business goals of the university and with the enterprise architecture principles that we have.
Great, thank you. And during your career, what kind of roles did you regularly recruit for?
So I'll focus on my last leadership role, which I ran the identity management service here at the University of Warwick. And in that role, I was recruiting to technical roles as system specialists, system administrators. And although that covered a range of technologies and platforms, I was generally looking for people that understood data, the storage, the curation, and the integration of data. Interpersonal skills would be a bonus.
Yes, definitely. Okay. And when you look at the CV or application, what are the top three things you look for?
Okay, three things: clarity, brevity, and relevance to the role. And I'll expand on that. So, as a recruiting manager, if you're lucky, you'll get many applications for the single role that you have on offer. And I say that's lucky because you can then pick the cream of the crop from that. But remember, if you're wading through 50 applications, you need them to be clearly laid out so that you can access the information in there. And these three things are connected, really. They need to be brief, as in no longer than they need to be to cover the essentials that you're looking for. And they need to be relevant to the role.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is don't include irrelevant information. So the job description that you've read and you've applied for will say what the recruiting organization is looking for. Focus on that, because this is the stage at which you get your foot in the door if you tick those boxes. So what the recruiting manager wants to understand quickly is whether the candidate on paper is fit for the role.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's very useful. Thank you. And what are the biggest mistakes when applying for jobs?
Well, this returns to something I said, really. I think the common mistake I found is including too much information, which is to say material that isn't relevant to the role and the essentials that I'm looking for at that stage. The written application are just buried in a mass of words or essays and sentences about experiences that are not actually relevant at this point. And I'm sure they make the candidate a very rounded human being, but they're, as I say, we've got a pile of applications to get through. You need to get to the core stuff so that candidate can be invited for interview.
Yeah. So you mentioned about there is a lot of things which are not relevant. Let's say if somebody is applying for a developer role and they have done their degree, and while they have done the degree, they were working somewhere part time. That may be in a restaurant or something, or in a supermarket. Should they include some of the information if it is relevant?
I think that if there are gaps in a working CV, I think it is important to fill those gaps. But again, if the work wasn't relevant to the role, don't give me too much detail. It's perfectly fine and noble to engage in any kind of work when you can't find your ideal position, and that's great. And I think that's good for a recruiting organization and manager to understand. But I don't need to understand the details of how well you worked with customers in the restaurant while you were waiting tables. But it's good to know that you had an attitude that says, obviously, I couldn't just sit on my laurels and I have bills to pay.
Yeah, but they could use perhaps that experience to explain maybe how they had to organize things and organization
Absolutely.
skills. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think if the role is asking for that as an essential requirement of the job, then I think if that's your relevant experience, then you should absolutely play that up in the application.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. How important are cover letters?
Well, here at the University of Warwick, they're not a requirement, but also there is scope to include them, and that's perfectly acceptable. And I think the principles there apply in just the same way, that please don't repeat in the covering letter the essential requirements that you might have covered in the application form or in any other piece, or simply repeat your CV. Make it short and to the point, perhaps why this role is attractive to you and why you've applied, but really keep it brief and articulate. If it's well constructed, I think that's a bonus.
Yeah.
Could work in your favor.
Yeah, definitely. So, what makes a candidate memorable after an interview, in your view?
I suppose really it's the competence in the interview, actually, and that is manifest in the preparation that is obvious to an interviewer or an interview panel. You can see the candidates that are well prepared. Nervousness is fine. We're all nervous. I'm nervous now.
Yeah.
In fact, the interview panel are often quite anxious to perform well themselves, because everybody in that situation wants the candidate to do well.
Yeah.
We want the best of you to be manifest in that situation. So that's fine. Stumbling over your words, pauses, this is all fine. But someone who knows the brief, who knows the role that they're applying for, has gone through some preparation, perhaps a practice with family or friends to think about the kind of questions that they really, you can work out what you're going to be asked, because again, the job description that you've applied for will indicate what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And think about your answers, and answer them fully with examples. So a good candidate is a well prepared candidate, and very often in the roles that I've recruited for, there's a presentation element now.
Yeah.
And this is really an opportunity to shine. And I prepare presentations now in my work, and they are time consuming to do, but it's definitely worth putting the effort in. So memorable candidates are prepared candidates, I think.
Yeah. I think a couple of points where you mentioned good candidates up their qualities by examples. So can you elaborate on that? And also presentation. Sometimes a candidate comes and say, do you have Wi-Fi here? Because my presentation is in my email.
Yeah.
So what kind of steps they should take prior to the interview?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'll take the second point first. You're absolutely right. If you're turning up to give a PowerPoint presentation, you need to understand the restrictions of that. So I guess sales representatives of various companies will understand the pitfalls of this, but you need backup strategies. So what if your PowerPoint presentation isn't going to load?
Yeah.
What if your PowerPoint file is corrupted? At least have more than one copy with you on a different media. At least networks tend to be ubiquitous these days in terms of connecting, but don't count on it. So you need those local copies. But also, one of the bigger problems is often how you display.
Yeah.
your laptop screen. You in terms of preparation, again, you might ask ahead of time, what's available to me, what kind of ports are available that I can plug my laptop in. You might use an Apple Mac and it's got a particular kind of video output that they don't cover, or they do cover that and not others. So I think it's fine to call ahead and ask what the facilities are. And even when you know what the facilities are, have a backup. Sheets of paper at the end of the day if you need to. You might not know how many people are on the interview panel, although you could ask. It seems reasonable to understand that, and you could have handouts so that you can deliver your
Yeah.
presentation in a very manual way. And if there are problems and you've thought about them ahead of time and you've overcome them, that this will score points undoubtedly with the interview panel, because that's generally you're looking for people that can think
Yeah.
and think ahead of time. Your experience and your skills and the pieces of paper you picked up in school and university will get you so far, but to show excellence, this is where you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And another point we talked about is good candidate backup things with examples. Like, can you give some
Yes,
examples,
absolutely.
please?
So a key point here is you need to think of examples where you've been the actor in the solution that you're saying. So the interview will ask you a question about, what's your experience with this kind of technology or
Mhm.
this kind of situation
Yeah.
or a difficult customer. And you really need to draw on your experience and say what you did in that situation, and try as much as possible to think about yourself, because we're asking you. So answers like, we did this to solve that problem. Well, who's the we? I'm not really interested in the rest of your
Yeah.
colleagues in this situation. I am interested in what your activity was here and what you did. So absolutely solid examples in which you are the main actor.
Yeah. And just refer to, I was part of this situation and this is how I handle. That would
Yeah,
definitely help. Yeah.
yeah.
Great. Thank you. Are there any red flags that stand out during an interview?
Yeah, there were a couple that stand out for me. I think going back to what we were just talking about, you really need to substantiate any experience that you've claimed on your application. A red flag would be a mismatch between anything you claim to have
Yeah.
experience or qualifications that you have that you don't have.
Mhm.
That would be a red flag. And I think then beyond that, any prejudices you have, clearly no one should have personal prejudices against other people, but what I'm really talking about here, and particularly in the roles that I've recruited for, are prejudices around technology. So
Yeah.
people that are zealous about Apple technology is the best technology and nothing else should be considered,
Mm.
because at least in that respect, we want open minds. You may need to be covering all sorts of technologies in the role that you're applying for. So, and we would want to see people that are generally interested in the space in its entirety and not particular niches, and holding on to prejudices like that too tightly.
Yeah. What is your view? Because nowadays, people are using
Mhm.
AI a lot, and you can put your job description and your
Mm,
CV into AI like ChatGPT or any other tool, and it will give you the full application. What is your view on that?
yeah. So my initial reaction is this is inauthentic, and I don't like it. And then I thought about it a little bit more. We've reached the stage already where AI can construct language which is in your voice,
Yeah.
and it's going to be indistinguishable from you. Your digital twin, in fact, is a phrase that was used fairly recently around AI. And when I did think about it, most candidates want to present themselves at the written stage in the best possible light. They want to get their foot in the door. And to some extent, technology has always been used, or there's been help in massaging the application to best fit the role. So you're emphasizing where you fit the role particularly, and maybe downplaying other areas that are, well, I would hope you would, not include irrelevant areas anyway. Spell checking, grammar checking. I mean, an application, at least in the past, which had grammar errors and spelling errors, would, in my mind, be a down mark, actually, a mark against. We actually expect people to do this kind of checking through their application, even if
Yeah.
it's getting a friend to look through it and say, this is coherent. So I think I've softened my view on that. And where I come to is at the end of the day, you want to get into an interview and you're going to be face to face with somebody. You need to be the real deal. So whatever the AI has constructed about you, proof check it for goodness sake.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, decide that this is me, and if it is, okay, we probably won't know the difference. But at the end of the day, you've got to sit there in front of someone and be the real deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So use AI, but with caution, and make sure that it sounds like your language, and also it represent yourself in that writing, because otherwise when you go in the interview it will be sort of difference compared to what you're
Absolutely, I
saying.
think so.
Great, thank you. What do you believe is the right balance between technical skills and soft skills during an interview? Because I have noticed that a lot of people talk a lot about technical skills because that's what the role is about, but when it comes to the soft skills they are not covering a lot.
Yes, I think my experience over long years has probably bent me towards the soft skills, and as I think you were headed yourself in that question, really. So most of my recruitment has been recruiting to technical roles. So really, the technical skills are a baseline, but the soft skills are so important because I've certainly worked with people who have probably strong technical skills, but in terms of the soft skills and dealing with people and really leveraging those skills to help the organization is much more difficult unless you have those soft skills. I think both aspects can be learned on the job, and certainly if we're looking at junior roles, it would be too much to expect a candidate to have a raft of experience in all the areas that you want, or even necessarily qualifications. But the soft skills that probably worked on from when we're from childhood all the way through, these are much harder to develop later. I mean, I think the technical skills, if you're an articulate and bright individual, they can be learned
Yeah.
and picked up on the job. And as we've worked in IT, the IT that we're working with now bears no resemblance really to the stuff we started with, at least in my case. As you said, 35 years ago, we were moving beads across a bar on an abacus at that point. So we've had to learn as we go along, and that's true for everybody coming in the industry now. What you know today and what you're qualified to do today, you'll be doing something else in a few years' time. It really is the soft skills which can swing it for you, because if you're able to communicate well, able to understand a changing landscape and be flexible in that, and your ability to deal with people, this will take you much further.
Yeah, definitely. Great, thank you. Have you ever hired someone who wasn't the strongest candidate on paper but performed brilliantly in the interview?
Yes, I think so. The individual I'm thinking about actually comes back to the soft skills, who maybe it's not a soft skill, but in terms of the written aspect of their communication, their application was extremely terse and short. And I've said previously in our interview here that keeping to the point is helpful.
Yeah.
As it happens, this individual was someone that I was already working in the organization, so I knew of them.
Yeah.
And I think that probably helped them get their foot in the door for the interview. And in a way, there was an amount of maybe humility in the written application that didn't really expand well enough on the depth of skills that they had. And then in the face-to-face interview, the verbal interview, they were extremely articulate, extremely friendly, and had a depth and breadth of knowledge which had not really surfaced from the application. So it's certainly the case that you can shine. And also I've seen people who you can tell at the beginning of the interview are really quite introverted and uncomfortable in an interview situation, and that nervousness and that stress of the situation, obviously there's a release of chemicals in your body, and they really shine. They start talking, and even to the point where maybe they're starting to talk too much, and so, but that's fine. It's
Yeah.
the interview chairman or the panel are there to keep the time constraints on the whole process. So that's good. Yeah, but definitely people can shine in an interview where the application is not necessarily as sparkling.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Thank you. If you think about the best people you have hired, or worked with,
Mm.
what did they have in common?
Technical roles. These were individuals that really could back up the technical skills that they claim to have on the application. One would expect that to be so anyway.
Yeah.
But when probed in the interview with a bit more depth, that they really shone. And it comes back to something I said earlier, that the outstanding candidates were the ones that had really prepared. So okay, they knew their stuff technically, but and I'm actually, this combines a few things that I've already said. An individual who I know is quite introverted, still working at the University of Warwick, a quiet person, but they technically a lot of depth, and they shone in the interview because there was a presentation element to it based on a quite often these things are projects you've been involved with, that you know, and your place in that, and they'd really done a considerable amount of preparation around that. They'd done diligence around the preparation, which actually, on hiring them into the team, that they continued that in their work. They were very diligent about their work. They're very thoughtful, put the time in ahead of time, and presented, you know, solutions which, generally speaking, were very sound, and you could trust them to deliver.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think sometimes people say they don't remember what to say in the interview, even though they have prepared.
Mm.
How would you advise them how they can prepare in those situations? And when they take a break and have a maybe water, they just think that it's not going well. That takes over, and they get really nervous.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I'm entirely qualified to tell people how to manage nerves, but I suppose I can give you personal experience. But
Yeah,
you need, from the recruiting point of view, from the recruitment panel point of view, it's fine to take a break. It's fine to lose your thread.
yeah.
And I could you remind me what I was just saying there, or could you remind me what the question was again? This is all fine because, as I said at the beginning, you know, we all want, everyone in the room wants to do well in that situation, and you want the candidate to give their best because we don't want to miss out on some, you know, absolute diamond of an individual
Yeah, yeah.
because we were unable to allow them to give of their best and really give us an understanding of who they are as a person. So
Mhm.
I think in terms of managing your nerves, you have to go into that situation understanding that that's fine.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fine. Most people are nervous. Most people of a normal mental disposition would be nervous in that position, you know. And it's acceptable. You will need coping mechanisms, but don't think that if you've babbled or you've lost your thread, this is the end of the interview. It's absolutely not. It's not over until someone in that interview panel says, "Thank you so much. We loved seeing you,
Yeah.
and we really appreciate your time." And they tell you that it's over. The game is on
Mm.
all the way to the end of the interview.
Yeah.
There's almost, you know, you can answer the question in the wrong way,
Mm.
perhaps, and go down the wrong track. Again, it's about stepping back in those situations as an interviewee. Take a breath, have a drink of water. They've asked you a question which you perhaps was outside of your preparation or unexpected at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
And you then need to think laterally. Well, I don't actually have the direct answer to that. It might not be a direct technical question, but it might be about a situation that you think, well, I've not directly experienced that, but what have I experienced in life that is analogous to that? It's very similar. And I can say, well, there was this situation, and I think it was similar in these ways, and this is how I handled it. It's fine. Just step back for a bit,
Yeah.
and it's fine.
Great. Thank you. Okay. What are some of the basic interview preparation steps that candidate often overlook? As per example, eye contact is very important.
I think it's a few things that I've already mentioned. I think as you know, do your homework
Yeah.
because you, the best way to feel confident or have confidence in an interview is to say, I did everything I could up to this point to prepare for this. I'm giving of my best.
Yeah.
Because that's all you can do, really. You give of your best. In terms of micromanaging the situation, I would say you know, take some deep breaths. Some really deep breathing as you go into this is a commonly understood technique for managing your nerves. It oxygenates your brain, so your thinking processes hopefully will come easier. And I think going back to preparation as well, don't just necessarily think about the role that's being asked for, but look into the organisation as a whole. What are the aims of the organisation? Most now publish their strategy and goals on the website, and I think it's worth doing a broader research around who you're working for. What are they interested in, and then once you get into the interview or you're meeting the first person who's gathering you up from the waiting area, smile.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much better you will feel, and not only that, the people facing you will feel better as well, because it's a human contact thing. It's perhaps one of those soft skills that we've already talked about. Smiling at people generally helps you make a connection, that initial connection, and it will be easier for you, and it will be easier for the interview panel.
Yeah. Sometimes certain situation come up. As an example, your interview at 11 o'clock, you decided to leave on time so that you will be there at 10:30, but train has cancelled, which means you're going to reach 11:15, which is not on time. And normally people get really stressed about that situation.
Yeah.
What are the logical steps they should take when they know that this is going to happen?
Well, call ahead.
Call ahead. Yeah.
Stay in contact. Again, it's not over until the interview panel say it's over.
Yeah.
So these situations are difficult for everyone. So it's planning as far ahead as possible as you can. I mean, we're all subject to the transport constraints within the United Kingdom as we're speaking here today, and these things do happen.
Yeah.
And if they're completely unavoidable, and you just can't get there in a reasonable time frame, well, the interview panel will have to take a view on that. But these things can be difficult from arranging the interview perspective, because in the case of the university here, you're never really going to be interviewed one-on-one. You're going to be interviewed by at least two individuals and possibly more.
Yeah.
And actually gathering those people together in a space for the interview is a logistic task in itself, which is not to say it can't be reconvened.
Yeah.
So keep everyone informed, and in that way try and keep a dialogue going and understand whether you can still be seen that day or whether it can be rearranged if it's a really bad situation.
Great. Thank you. What advice would you give someone applying for a role in the sector you work in?
Okay, so university recruitment, like a lot of public sector recruitment, is highly structured. So what I mean by that is applications are usually scored against criteria.
Yeah.
So it's important for the applicant to address each of the essential requirements explicitly.
Yeah.
Keep that clear, and don't bury those essentials in a lot of words, in some sort of essay. Bullet points. You asked for, I meet that requirement by, this. It sounds a bit mechanical, but actually at the paper application stage, this is absolutely fine. It certainly is with the university, because in our case, we've got human beings scoring those scripts and going, yes, I see the essential criteria, tick that off. And if you meet the essential criteria, then you should get an interview, frankly, because you've met the essentials. We haven't really talked about today, but increasingly we're approaching a world where these application scripts will be read in a mechanical way, as in we've got machines, maybe AI reading them and also checking them off. So again, it's important to make sure that you've ticked off the key essentials for the role. And something I've already mentioned is the thing about applying to a university is understand the things that universities are interested in, and think about if it's not actually asked for in the essentials or the desirables for the role description, if you've got a cover letter, this is the sort of thing that you can pick up and say, well, universities are interested in how can we facilitate research?
Yeah.
How can we better the student experience? How do we operate ethically in this environment? And how, and what are the constraints of a university? Well, budget, I'm not sure that's true of, it's probably true of every organization.
Yeah,
Budget is
definitely.
never endless, but
Mm.
it's particularly stringent in the public sector and with universities. And they have constraints around policy and governance and indeed public scrutiny. So these are the things that universities care about. So these are the things to keep at least in your mind, even if not, they may come out in the interview, and they may be things that you can play to in your cover letter as well. So I think that's how you would shape it for this organization.
Great. Thank you. Finally, I think it's the end of the interview when what kind of questions should a candidate ask at the end? Because many times I hear no question or just about when you're going to tell us about the outcome. That's what I hear.
So this is probably your last opportunity
Mhm.
as a candidate to leave a great impression.
Yeah.
And it's human behavior to generally remember the first thing, or maybe the first candidate of the day and the last candidate of the day, or the last thing that somebody said. So this is it. So be interesting. And I think as important as that is not to be self-serving in the respect that there are questions that candidates ask which will inevitably get covered in the terms and conditions of the employment. Like, how much holiday do I get?
Yeah.
So you're immediately thinking about taking time off, which is fine. We all need time off, but this now is not the time to ask.
Yeah.
So, or even, maybe when will I hear back? One would expect the interview panel to actually give you that information. So maybe don't waste your question or questions on these sorts of minutiae of the process and the contract. I think the better questions are the ones that show curiosity and preparation for the interview. So I think it's fine to be, somewhat self-serving, but ask, what's the approach here to training and development?
Yeah.
What does that look like? It shows that you're keen to be a person to be employed here and to be developed and to fit in with the university's goals moving forward. You're thinking about the future here. I think that's great. And indeed, if an interview is a two-way process, do you like the answer you're hearing as a candidate?
Yeah.
To what the hiring manager goes, oh well, it's gone on an ad hoc basis. You ask and I ever think about it, and and think, well, I don't know, that doesn't sound very structured to me. So there is a bit of a two-way with that question. Those sorts of things. And I think beyond that, you might think of an interesting question around the sector and an approach. I mean, you might not get a great answer in an interview, but you say, well, what's your approach to providing AI tooling to your staff? Is that something you're doing now? Is that something you're thinking about?
Yeah.
Have you thought about how you're going to ring fence some of your data from these AI tools?
Yeah.
And I think, okay, that's specific to our industry, but it shows that you're thinking about, what is perhaps the cutting edge of the industry you're working in, at least. And as I say, you might not get a very good answer to that one, but you've demonstrated to the panel at that point that you're a serious person and you're thinking about the industry you're working in. You're interested in the industry you're working in. It's not just something you turn up to do 9 to 5. You're thinking beyond the boundaries of what you're paid to do. So be interesting.
Yeah, and ask questions accordingly.
Yes.
Sometimes you maybe, if you're going as an architect, data architect as an example, what kind of challenges are there in the data world at the moment?
Yes.
That could be a good question.
Absolutely.
Where hiring manager can give you some idea of what are the current challenges they are facing. And then you can think about, yes, my experience is appropriate to deal with these challenges.
Absolutely. I mean, it's having thought about it and your response there. I mean, it's not, what you don't want to do is try and catch out your recruiting manager. So you need to ask the question in the broadest sense.
Yeah.
To as I say, demonstrate that you're thinking about these things, and therefore you're a good person to hire.
Yeah, definitely. Alan, thank you so much for sharing your experience and insight. Your perspective from over 3 decades in tech and has given us a good look at how industry has changed and what skills continue to matter regardless of the technology involved. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please follow us and share this episode with someone who is looking to build a career in technology. Thank you for listening to Inside the Interview, and we will see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.